Welcome to the show, everyone. I'm JJ Flazanes, your empowerment strategist and producer. Thank you for downloading today's episode. I'm very excited to bring to you today's conversation with Dr. Miriam Rahav. We're going to be talking about spirituality and medicine. And it's going to go in so many different directions, actually, because it was her topic. And so I wasn't sure where we were going to go. And we covered so much, and I'm so inspired. And I hope that you are too. You know, I want to say thank you for those of you that are a regular listener to the show, because I'm bringing you all kinds of different content and in different areas of life, from relationships to spirituality to alternative medicine and cancer and even business and money, manifestation, law of attraction, and really everything astrology, like under the sun of spirituality, medicine. And I mean, really, I could have that show, Spirituality Medicine. So I want to say thank you for being a listener. And if these kinds of shows touch you, change you, inspire you, motivate you, and give you clarity, I would really appreciate if you would share the show, episodes, or just the entire show with other people in your life who you feel would respond well. Definitely don't shove it down anyone's throat who's not asking or who doesn't indicate that they're some kind of seeker. I find that the most active listeners and the most active participants in this community are people who are searching, who are looking, who are wanting, and who are verbally either asking or energetically asking for solutions for a better life, ways to feel better, ways to have what you want in life, and they know and believe deep down that there is more. So I would just really appreciate you sharing the show with those who you think would respond well, and I say thank you in advance for doing that. That is the best way to create this community, is to really reach out to the people who we know, like, and trust, the ones who we can stay connected to and build this web, if you will, of spirituality, love, hope, healing, and miracles. Miriam Rahav, MD, is a triple-boarded physician in the fields of internal medicine, hospice, and functional medicine. She's also certified in acupuncture through the Tristate School of Acupuncture. She is trained in ART through the Klinghardt Academy, and importantly, in metabolic and terrain-centric approaches to oncology with Dr. Nasha Winters. Dr. Rahav started an integrative medicine center in the heart of New York City in 2017, where she is joined by colleagues in offering heart-centered integrative medicine to a diverse community of fellow humans. Enjoy today's show. Welcome to the show, everyone. If you are finding this on YouTube, know that this is also a podcast. You can click below, take that link, and then you can take us with you on your walk, your run, your drive, whatever you're doing if you're multitasking, because podcasting is really easy to multitask with, and you can just have us in your ear. If you are on the podcast, know that we also recorded a video. So come on over to jjflazanes.tv and you can meet Dr. Miriam. We're going to have a great conversation today. I know you guys are going to love this. And if you found this on YouTube because of Dr. Miriam or because of the title and you don't know me, right now, is there any other place that they can get more of you? Because I'm going to have a conversation and I am going to talk on my own show. I'm an empowerment strategist and a producer, not just a host. I have information. So where else could they find you, Dr. Miriam, if they want more information from you?
Thank you so much for asking. I'm so excited to be with you here today. We have a website. It's rahavwellness.com, and that's RAHAV as in Victor Wellness, one word.com. We have a little bit of a social media presence. If you want to see what I'm saying on Instagram, you can follow Miriam Rahav MD or check out little things that we have to share there. We have a Facebook page that has some overlap with so just social media and your platform of preference. And we're looking to, maybe through inspiration with you and other brilliant producers and people who are putting out content, maybe strive to do more of that one day. But that's it for now.
Yes, you will be doing that one day, because what you and I are going to talk about is very needed in the world, and you know it, and I know it, and everybody else after this show is going to know it. So yes, there's going to be a demand for you, and we have to figure out how best to make that happen. So today's conversation is going to be about spirituality and medicine. Now, saw that title and thought, I have never talked about that. I think that is amazing. And I want those of you that are listening on the podcast, you did hear an intro about Dr. Miriam, but can we just give the people who are watching on YouTube a little bit of a background on how you got to where you are now in terms of why did you get involved in medicine in the first place? And why are we talking about spirituality in medicine?
Oh my goodness. So getting involved in medicine in the first place is a funny story for me. My first job that I was able to kind of pay my way into the world with was actually as a high school teacher. I did training as a teacher when I was still in college, and that was a way to do something that I loved, was work with young people and also share my love of stories. So I was actually a comparative literature major, and that was an incredible field of study because it was an integration of so many things. You could bring in language, but you could bring in anthropology, you could bring in linguistics, you could do so much. And there was such a rich comparative literature was also inherently reading bodies of literature from one culture as compared with another. And so my love of stories then could be integrated into teaching stories, and that was also a way that I could go out into the world and earn my daily bread. So I spent my last year of college as a student teacher in the Providence, Rhode Island public school system, and then got hired by a Japanese company at the time that had a recruiting office in in Boston rather, and flew to Tokyo right after I graduated from college and started teaching in Tokyo, which I did for about 2 years. I took a little break from teaching in Tokyo to kind of check off a bucket list wish to learn how to scuba dive. And Thailand was a hop, skip, and a jump, so to speak, away from Tokyo, about a 3-hour flight. And something funny happened in Thailand. I'm from New York City, and I had been living in Tokyo, so I was in these very urban environments, and I wound up on this island and watched life happen in a community of people who were so tied to natural rhythms and to plants. I actually met someone who took me to his ancestral home, where when I arrived, his father was wearing this helmet of a leaf kind of poultice. It was like this green paste all over his head. And I said, "What's that?" And he said, "Oh, well, my father, he gets this really itchy scalp. So he takes and he points at the tree where he takes the leaf off of, and he crushes it. And that's, and then he said that his mother has never been to a hospital. She had 8 children. And, I was just, my eyes were my eyes were like popping out of my head. I was like, oh my God, this is so amazing. And I felt like it was the missing link to my Jewish New York life. I come from a people, I think, who, with a complex history, but a lot of history of landlessness. And here were a people who were so grounded and part of a place and part of a time and part of a fauna. And it was like finding an oasis in the desert. And so I wound up also intersecting in Thailand with a community of health seekers, and discovered that there was a whole world of fasting and cleansing, and somehow was drawn into experience why I went on my first very prolonged fast, and everything changed. And I think that will lead into, this idea of spirituality in medicine, that my first pathway into medicine was this shift in my own consciousness, a profound shift, a physical shift that led to a shift in consciousness. And that I knew somehow that what had happened to me when I underwent this, a physical transformation in this time and place was very important. I didn't have all the kind of scientific details of how and why, but I had my lived experience. I think that's really important when we speak about medicine, because first and foremost, I'm not a doctor. First and foremost, I'm a human kind of on the seas of life like everyone else, and have had these experiences. And what were the experiences that changed my life for the better? What were the inflection points? Why and how did those experiences change my life for the better? And can I really study that and understand that and extend that to my fellow brothers and sisters in the world? Was really the journey that was either I launched or it was launched upon me or however that happened. And I didn't exactly know what to do with it. I knew it was profound. I knew it was something that I needed to continue to understand and study. And not knowing how, I just stayed in Thailand. I stayed in Thailand and continued to study plants. I found out through a dear friend who had done some interesting work herself in Thailand that she was aware of an organization in the north of Thailand that was trying to identify traditional healers in the field. Interestingly, because the AIDS epidemic had just burgeoned in Thailand. This is 1997. And there was a lack of infrastructure, there was a lack of resources, and there was some funding from government bodies and World Health organizations to try and see what solutions might be had. And this particular organization said, well, let's create community. And they worked to identify traditional healers in the field and said, are you guys interested in working and supporting people living with HIV/AIDS? And if so, let's create a network. Let's create a support system. And so out of the nothing, people got together and created a something. And I got to be, through by accident or design, in a time and space where I saw through my interest in plants, ultimately how people came together to navigate a crisis, an epidemic. Isn't that interesting? And it was interesting, some people stood up. I met one particular nurse who worked in a very small district hospital. So each province, like Chiang Mai, which is the province where this organization was, has districts. This district's name was Chom Thong. And there was a little regional hospital, one doctor, one nurse, one pharmacist. And her job, so they did have the ability to test for HIV. And her job was to give the result back, but there was nothing else to give in the other hand. And she couldn't live with that. And she created a support group. Once there was a support group, there was a place for people to go. We met every month, and people in the community who felt they might have a contribution or an interest started showing up. So they're in temples in Thailand. It's been a while since I've lived there, but some temples are a repository for herbal wisdom, and monks know how to grow plants and encapsulate plants. And so there was an interest in donating some of this plant medicine to the community of people living with HIV/AIDS. There was, someone like me who was just showing up and saying, wow, I think this is incredible. And it was really interesting to the community that this woman from New York would show up, and it was just a friendship and learning about their experience. One of the things that they mentioned is that once they got this diagnosis of HIV, there was such a fear, and that's another interesting thing, is an emotion, and that's an important thing to discuss, fear. And it's something that comes up when people are confronting, a health challenge. It's a very dominant, and it was a very dominant emotion that came up both for the person with the diagnosis, but also the people around them. And they described an isolation and a loneliness and a lack of and a loss of human touch. And so then shows up this massage therapist who had come from Israel and had worked in an AIDS hospice in Israel. And he and I told him this story, and he said, well, let's do a massage training. Let's not only should we touch them, but we should learn how to touch each other and create circles, and so I was able to, as I had picked up some of the Thai language, be an interpreter, and we ran this whole massage, so these are just little anecdotes about how I was led step by step with no medical background whatsoever, into the importance of all these forces at play, of coming together, of staying open, of being curious, of asking questions, of creating community, and frankly, just showing up with an intention, right? Showing up with an intention, somehow to be of help, somehow to show up, somehow to bear witness, somehow to be of support in whatever skill set that we have. There was also an interesting temple in that district of Chom Thong, the only temple in all of Thailand, as far as I know, that is run exclusively by nuns. And they came to the support group meeting and they offered a retreat to the entire community on Buddhist approaches to death and dying. And that wound up being this incredible connection to me. And I think the first very conscious and overt spiritual training that I had, where I would go into the temple and live with the nuns, like the nuns, and obtain that training from them, initially with the support group and then on my own for days on end. I'd just be in and out, in and out. You could come in and out. And what the nun who ran this temple said is that we can all be part of help or solutions, and we can always give whatever we have to give. If you have financial resources and that's what you want to share, that's great. If you have brute strength, you can lend that. You can come and you can work in our temple. If you have time, give us your time and share this information with us. You know, if you have a skill, if you know how to build, if you know how to cook, I was always in the kitchen over there. That everyone and their contribution is inherently valuable. And when you set the intention of leaning in and supporting, then you'll find the way. And so we can all be who we are, and we can all be part of, ultimately tikkun, healing and making this world a better place. And I think all of these things were all swirling around me as I ultimately made the decision to study medicine.
And you not only, I mean, your background is extensive, triple board physician in the field of internal medicine, hospice, and palliative medicine and functional medicine. Functional medicine by itself is a separate thing. I mean, these are all different, and then there's acupuncture and and then now with the metabolic approach to cancer with Dr. Nasha. Like, I see the journey, I see the unfolding of your journey. What I want to connect together, because again, I was excited when I saw one of your recommendations for what to talk about with spirituality and cancer. So let's go back to that, the temple and that feeling. And then when you got into it, Chinese medicine and Chinese medicine in itself is a whole body medicine. It's always been about how does it work together, and looking at systems versus our allopathic system, which looks at, what are our symptoms and how do we go in at one point, and we're not even going to look at the rest of what's going on. We're just going to take, just your symptom and treat your symptom and never ask the question, what's the root cause? Because who knows, maybe if we treat the root cause, you don't have to worry about the symptoms. But, and I'm, we're on the same page here. And people that are listening to my show. Well, I mean, I've been saying this for 20 years. Doctors think I'm nuts and an arrogant bitch. Because at 25, I would literally challenge them, like, come on now. When the doctor says, oh, I have knee pain, I say, I came in because I have knee pain. Oh, well, let's take x-rays. I said, x-rays aren't going to show you soft tissue. I'm 25. X-rays are not going to show you soft tissue. I'm telling you it's not a bone. Oh, okay, well, whatever. So you $500 later and x-rays later. Oh, it's not bone. Yeah, no shit, Sherlock. I told you it wasn't bone. But who are you? I'm 25. I'm not a doctor. I must not know anything about medicine or my body. And I was studying, because I was a trainer at that point, and I was studying the body, and I did know my body very well, as I still do, in that intuitive sense that you talked about early on, that no matter what it is, we have to be in touch with who we are, our vibration, our energy, our consciousness, the messages that we get, regardless of if it's validated by other people, like you're talking about fear and like sort of the disconnection that happens with fear. So I want to come back to where in the journey, because I'm hearing all of the really intricate, conscious, spiritual connection, the everything is connected mode from the beginning. Was there ever a disconnection and then a reconnection that linked everything together? Or did you have such a strong pull that you just sort of, like me, never let it down, and you always just found the way to integrate it or found the spiritual connection?
That's such a beautiful and profound question. I think that I watched the disconnection. I went through my training in medicine, after having been exposed to that whole world, which was a very whole mind, body, spirit community, experience. I then went to pre-medicine and to medicine, and that was very, very different. I always looked to find the mystery and the majesty within that training. There was also so much training that we were responsible for, so much knowledge that in of itself, I think, might have been what sometimes made it feel more narrow. I think the narrowness sometimes of medicine wasn't because medicine is really narrow. Medicine is vast and endless. There are frameworks of time around it. We have this unit and you have to graduate in this unit. I think medicine ultimately, as difficult as it is to get through and as much knowledge as we are responsible for, and how we need to be vetted. We need to be vetted as owning this amount of knowledge. And then that's the medical school experience. And there's a transition from the knowledge into the application of the knowledge. And in that, the school, is responsible for saying, do we have the personal, emotional, social skills to hold the seriousness, the gravity of all this, and be responsible and be ethical? And there's so much within that we're responsible for. I can understand how we can kind of fall into potentially a contraction of sorts, a narrowness of sorts, that we can get prescriptive because it's overwhelming. And I think that's something that we can all relate to, just overwhelm, and how do we deal with overwhelm? And so I think because I understood it as such, I don't think I understood it from a sense of being critical or not understanding of the system and the way it's set up. But I think I also understood the limitations of that system, having come from something that was so different, so that I could think around that system. And I think when you are sometimes just going through without having this meandering story that I opened with, then you don't have that perspective. I mean, maybe that is a part of my journey that I now am so grateful for, that I was just here and I was there and I was in this culture and that culture, and they were speaking this language and they were speaking this language, and they had this values and they had these values, and this was urban and this was agrarian. I think it lent me a certain flexibility and a certain kind of ability to jump from vantage points and see the beauty and the value in different. So I really deeply value medicine and my medical training. You're right. There is something there, though, that gets lost along the way. And I think that's really what we want to speak to here and reclaim. And it's not at odds with medicine. I think what I experience is beautiful and healing in medicine, and in myself personally, in my own journey, and then what I can extend to others is that expansion, right? That expansion to include. And Chinese medicine does that instinctively. There's no separation. There's no separation between the physical body and the emotional body. So too in Ayurvedic healing systems, right? We have constitutions, and those constitutions include our emotional tendencies, our physical tendencies, our intellectual tendencies, right? Those are the dosha and the combinations of the dosha. There's nothing within the medicine, as I studied it in the Western perspective, that necessarily speaks to on a systems level. We all appreciate people's differences and their different characteristics and personalities, but that creates an operating system to really describe it and understand it. That connection to the emotional body and the physical body. Chinese medicine does that so beautifully. The kidneys and fear, the spleen and worry, the liver and anger, and how if we have an emotional injury, it happens on the emotional first. And when it's not able to resolve or move, it will manifest in the physical plane. And if we're able to look at the physical body and realize that is, of course, an expression of the physical body, but also and simultaneously an expression of the emotional body. And how can we find a bridge into our understanding of that person, the whole person, and speak to the physical, but also to the emotions that are tied into that. It doesn't necessarily mean that we have to talk about our emotions, but can ask questions. I ask questions, for example, when I see, let's say, someone's liver enzymes are elevated. And one of our, when we have our medical symptom questionnaire, I look there and I see, are they also complaining of irritability, of anger, of quickness to anger? And maybe they're not. And then I might ask. And then I might ask, once we see those, we let's say it's more comfortable to treat the physical liver. I'll say, are there anything else you notice? And oftentimes it's not always that person, but if they're with a family member, a partner, they'll say, yeah, you know.
It's interesting that you just brought up the liver, and I'm going to backtrack because I do appreciate what you said. And I know often it can come across as I am anti-Western medicine, and I'm not going to say I'm not, but here's where I love what you said in terms of the inclusivity, because that wasn't where you started. And when you start with a knowingness of a mind-body approach, you can't disconnect from that. And so many people, because it's a truth, right? It's a truth within you that it doesn't matter what anyone else is going to say to you. This is your foundation. What I am sort of crunchy with is that the general population looks to Western medicine to handle everything. And because they don't want to be overwhelmed, because they don't want to learn anything, because they don't want to take responsibility for the things that they contribute to their own condition that they have manifested within their own body. So when I look at, I know for me, and I have this patterning. I remember in college, I had it. I was always looking for like that one teacher who would be my mentor and give me everything I needed. I was looking for my pill, if you will, in a person or in a way of being. And it wasn't until, I don't remember when I dealt with this and it's same thing with even different kinds of therapies, let's say some of the tactics and tools that we use in our empowerment strategist program, some of the things that I recommend. Even to the point of, my mother used to take care of an older woman in the church, and she cared for her, and the woman was very thin, and she was a nurse, I think, like in the service. And so she didn't have any kids. She didn't have a husband. And my mother would go over there often, and she was losing weight sort of rapidly. And the doctors wanted her to gain weight. And I remember talking about, like what she could have. And at the time, we're going back 10, 15 years, I think, because of the circumstances and situation, this was someone who wasn't going to get up and cook anything or elaborately have fresh ingredients all the time and make a shake. I think I probably said, give her Ensure. Now, would I ever drink that shit? No. But in this circumstance, it was applicable for the situation, right? It's, you pick the thing that's going to work the best to get the job done that the person's willing to do that makes sense. And for all of us, it's going to be a different thing. Mm-hmm. And so at some point in time, also, I had a medical intuitive that I worked with, and I didn't, again, love her. She did not hit all the boxes for me, but I kept seeing her. And the reason I kept seeing her is because there was value. And it's looking at, like you said, through each of the different stages of your learning in medicine, that they all have value. It's at what point in time, to me, it's a tool in a toolbox. And when is the right time to use this? When is the right time to execute this? And that is the right tool for me. But there are so many people that don't have a foundation or a basis in this mind-body approach. So all of a sudden this becomes weird. This becomes witch medicine and witchcraft, right? Like the intuition and being able to feel confident in your body's knowingness that you consciously may not have the information for, but your body's clearly telling you something, right? This, like, I'm a nut job when, for a lot of people because of that, not necessarily anybody who's listening right now, but in general, if I'm to have these conversations with the general population, this is not a welcomed, because I don't want to have to think that hard. So I'm just going to trust the system, and I'm going to do whatever the system tells me, even if it means I never really recover, I never really get better. And I have
What if I'm afraid not to trust the system?
What if what?
What if I'm afraid?
Yes, absolutely. What if I'm afraid? Absolutely. That's definitely a big piece in this. So one of the things that, in terms of it being a tool, in terms of looking at, again, who we are speaking to right now, those that have clicked through, if you're watching this on YouTube and you're still here, you are part of the tribe of people who know that there's something more. And it doesn't mean that it is an all or nothing. It's a combination of when is it the right thing, when is it appropriate, and to use all the information. Like you said, it's all of value at different times. And
yes.
That's the gathering of the information. So I just wanted to put that out there.
I appreciate that so much. And I want to speak to that. And I think that's one of the many things about my training in internal medicine, especially, that I appreciate, which is triage. Right. So, what we're speaking to now is something that we can speak to when it's safe to speak to, so in medicine, we take an oath, first do no harm. And so if someone is unstable, let's say hemodynamically unstable, if someone, one of their vital organs is not functioning properly, they can't breathe, or their liver is off, or they're going into, the kidney is in kidney dysfunction. Those are the things we need to address first. The person who presented to me with metastatic breast cancer, who had diarrhea for 3 months, we addressed the diarrhea. That is, but also at the same time, in our own consciousness, holding that person, I can also hold and be aware of the fear. I don't need to speak about the emotions, but I can transmit care and confidence. And I can say, all of these other things are important, but first things first. And there's an order of operations. And within that, we can speak to, and show up and not forget to speak to the emotional experience that this person is having as they contend with a very acute distress on top of a chronic, huge red hot concern, and say, we're holding space for all of this. One of the things that I think happens when we do our extensive lab work is that we step away from only doing a blood count, a liver function, a kidney function, a thyroid screen, and a blood sugar. And we look at some things that start validating. There's so much power that, that reconnecting to our intuitive selves can happen when that intuitive self is validated, that these things that I feel are actually on, that there can actually be a value placed next to them. So we start looking, for example, at adrenals. Adrenals make hormones. Those hormones can be high or low or normal. And then you start seeing the interplay between biodata, biofeedback, and what you feel. I think when I speak about one of the tricky things that I discovered in medicine, and it comes again from real pressures and systemic issues in the way medicine is delivered, systemic issues with medical education. And those are, we can have separate conversations about that. And interestingly, I came into the world of medicine from the world of education. So I really looked at that as an educator, what was there, but also what was missing. For example, just very, very briefly, and I know that a lot of people might not know this. And so if this is a reveal that's helpful, I want to reveal to you that in all of my medical training, 4 very, very dense and intense years of non-stop studying and testing, and we had pharmacology all the time. In 4 entire years, we had 1 2-hour lecture on nutrition.
I knew you were going to say that. You're like the third doctor that said that.
I think it's important when we ask our doctor, what should I eat? It may be that that doctor has taken a personal shining to nutrition and has gone on and done a lot of extra training in nutrition. If not, if we're relying on the education we got within that, system, then we're actually operating from a place of not knowing and a place of lack. We're also trained that we need to know. We need to know. Our training, when we're going on rounds, our senior doctor is saying, what's your plan? What's your plan? What's your plan? So if you don't have a plan, that's shameful. And it's public. You're in the hall. You're with your team around you, the nurses, it's a public shame. And I think that some of that might become part of what we might call that, the beautiful parts of medicine is standing up, taking responsibility, taking the weight, being accountable. But there are also all of these things in the unspoken curriculum, and coming from the world of education, I had language and consciousness around the unspoken curriculum, the shame of not knowing. So we don't say, I don't know, even when sometimes that's the best answer. Many times.
It's the right answer.
It's the right answer because
it's the answer with integrity, because the idea that oh, food doesn't matter, right? Which nobody in this who's watching or listening to this, I don't know about watching, but
Yeah,
no one who's
obviously.
listening to this we're past that. But for the rest of the world, when the doctor says, oh, the diet doesn't matter, we're like, when are you going to come into this world right now? Because you are so far behind, and it makes me have less respect when I understand culturally within rounds, you're taught to make up something.
Mhm.
But at the same time, when you're in private practice, nobody's watching you. And as a patient, I'd rather you tell me, you know what, I don't know. God, I would respect a doctor that finally would say, I just don't know. I don't know very much about that. I think I was in New York at the time where I brought it from New York, or maybe when I just moved to California. I had a paper, and I don't get the paper, but it was about a doctor who had seen a bunch of patients, and he was logging. He'd tell them the diagnosis, and then he'd say, well, would you like me to write your prescription? They'd all say, no, thank you. And then they'd come back and they would be better. And he finally had to ask, it kept happening, why do you even come to me if you're not going to follow my treatment plan? They said, because we want to do alternative medicine. So then he just thought his role, it was a very interesting article to prove that, because he did finally ask the question, why are you even coming to me? Well, because we value your diagnosis. We just don't value your prognosis or your treatment plan.
Mhm.
And so I appreciate that, but I want to get back to, because I just want to find that sort of
Oh, yeah.
the through
Mhm.
line of spirituality right now for those that are listening. And I'm sure we don't need to hammer it, but because you can feel part of it, but I want to bring the feeling part into words for those, and conceptually from your position about either the integration, the acknowledgement, the connection about, and, sort of have people think about it in a new way.
Yeah, so I want to speak to that. I will say that one of the things that I really appreciated about being in the hospice and palliative medicine space, which is one of my board specialties, officially, but how I came to that is going back to this backstory and coming into a space and time, and again the story of HIV/AIDS and not having a lot of resources or in terms of labs and pharmaceuticals, and inevitably there were people who were transitioning, and part of what was happening and part of what was so important for me to be part of was being present with humans as they confronted mortality and as they transitioned. And so that was the first place where intuitively I just experienced that crossroads, which is so prescient as people confront mortality and ultimately make a transition. All of us ultimately make that transition, but you're really confronted with it when you get a thunderclap diagnosis. And then carrying that with me into my medical training, so that when it looked like, and you need a certain amount of, I guess, contact with and experience with to know what that looks like and feels like. It looks and feels very different in the hospital than it might on media or portrayals if you haven't had intimate experience with the continuum of life into transition. And so that would be something where I just came at it from a place of having held it before. I was a lot older than a lot of my cohorts, sweet, hardworking, brilliant people who didn't have the experience of holding someone in a transition. I had a reference point. And so I used to speak to that when, as we come as internists through the ICU and through the intensive care units and the cardiac care units and the ER and the cancer ward and the medicine wards, where you're confronted with so much that's at such an unbelievable level of acuity, and not forget that people and family members are having huge feelings around this, that this is an inflection point in that person's life and in that person's family's life. And stepping out of the role, which we not stepping out of, because I was responsible for the labs. I was responsible for the orders. I was responsible for a million details. I was responsible for communicating with nursing. I was responsible for communicating with my supervising physicians, with any specialty doctors that we thought were appropriate referrals, and so on and so forth, and the whole incredible busyness of the life of a resident. But also not forgetting to ask someone how they're doing, and to say, do you know what's going on? Can I explain it to you? Do you have any questions? I mean, you might not think of that as spirituality in medicine, but it's stopping for a second and slowing down and trying to see someone through, or see a situation through someone else's eyes. And if it was a situation that looked like it was going in the wrong direction, and what that looks like is there's more than one organ that starts not doing so well. The kidneys going down, the breathing is not, the liver enzymes are going up, that someone, has a lot of background, metabolic dysfunction, and it looks like it might be that they might not necessarily have a lot of time. That's such a scary thing for the doctor, of course, for the person who's going through it, but also for the doctor. You have to stop and you're saying, okay, this is when I need to step outside of my own fear. And that's really the training. I think ultimately it's a lot of knowledge, but it's about, can I hold my own emotional being in awareness and have the integrity and have the courage to call up the family and say, listen, it's never fun to be the bearer of possibly bad news. And I would love it if I'm wrong and I can be the fool tomorrow or the next day when your loved one makes a perfect recovery and I was, the downer Debbie. I'm totally fine with that. The other side of that coin, though, is that if I didn't make this call and tell you things don't look good and give you the opportunity to say things that should be said, to ask questions that need to be asked, including, if this is it, how do you want to be buried? Or do you want to be buried? Or do you want to be cremated? I mean, it's incredible. People don't ask these questions because it's so taboo. And I think that part of that is what I would step into out of a feeling of obligation that was the right thing. It was the right thing for them. It was treating them with a kindness, even if that was harder for me emotionally, that how people experience all of these experiences is just as important as what is how. And that there was someone there who was witness, and there was someone there that cared about the family experience. And oftentimes we get so crushed by all of our obligations that there's that extra step. And it's the common human, it's the common humanity, right? But it takes so much awareness and wherewithal within ourselves. And it's also interesting. I don't know officially within the system that there is a value placed on it. There's a tremendous value. I mean, there was a tremendous value in terms of, I can't tell you how many nurses said that family had such a hard time, but they kept on saying the doctor called and told us, and that makes it, at least we weren't surprised. At least we, that I got that feedback all the time, or people said, we feel like you're really with us. You're not just a kid, you understand. I got the feedback all the time. Interestingly, though, in terms of the system, there was pressure on me oftentimes not to be that person because it took longer. So I was inefficient. I was the doctor who talked too much to patients. And so I lived with that tension. And I think part of that was my own ability to hold fast to a value system that was internal, as you said, that couldn't be shaken because it was right, because it was the truth. So that's one piece that I wanted to speak about, our own journey through experiencing life and extending ourselves as humans to other humans in whatever way we manifest that, as a trainer, as a producer, as an entertainer, as a healer. There's always who we are, right? I think about that in every picture I ever see, there's always someone looking. And that's the frame, right? There's always a viewer, right? It's like us ourselves, like the viewer is always part of the picture, even if we can't see them. Our own spiritual self is always part of the work we do, even though it's not necessarily spoken to or seen. I think that's part of what I mean when I think about spirituality and medicine. I think it's about our own conscious journey very much. The other thing I wanted to speak, and this is one of the greatnesses of my training in hospice and palliative care, that it would be an explicit question that was asked of the person we were working with. Do you have a spiritual practice, and what is it? And we had conversations about what spirituality can mean. Again, oftentimes what I saw, regardless of the faith, was an ability to expand the context of what we were experiencing, to have a greater context, kind of like, the story of Jesus Christ, who suffered tremendously. and who still held fast to love. That is the ultimate, right? It's the spirit soaring over the bodily suffering. It's the ultimate image of suffering, of being, and we say like our cross to bear. It's so imbued in our language and in our understanding. Well, that's my cross to bear. So is there meaning, a greater meaning to how we are presented with our challenges, with our cross to bear? And that's a story, of course, within the Christian tradition. It's a story within the Jewish tradition. We're constantly tested. Right now in the Torah, as we go through the year, there's a Torah portion that's read every week. And we're in the book of Exodus. Well, what is that a story of? So much suffering and enslavement and a test of faith. Can we step out of that? Well, that's actually terrifying. And we don't want to let go. Last week, the seas, the red was parted, and Israel was led out of Egypt. And they land on the other side. First of all, they're attacked. It was like, why? It's like, didn't enough just happen? I mean, there were like plagues and everything. And oh my God, like, does this ever end? And isn't that the human experience? Does this ever end? And after that, okay, so then, this attack that's vanquished and Israel is again. And then there's no water for 3 days. And they're like, we're so thirsty and we're so afraid. And they say to Moses, my God, we don't know where our next food, our next drink is coming from. We would rather go back to Egypt and be slaves in the certainty of that than be here and not know where our next, our next drink is going to come from. And how are we going to survive? And isn't that just the eternal human experience? And don't we need, right, that spiritual training and say, well, somehow, let me just put a space between the real and imminent fear and threat, which comes at us in all directions all the time. Now, it's just so, red hot at every moment and is affecting us and meeting us each where we are. But isn't that always the truth? And isn't that ultimately an experience of a challenge, a loss, an illness, is about us confronting? What are we confronting in ourselves? And can we put that into a context of, well, I'm very uncomfortable right now. And can I hold that for a minute and say, I can choose how to respond to this? And ultimately, what spirituality is a training and in being able to just open up that space and say, do I actually have any leeway here in how I respond? And one of those ways we can respond is say, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. And I'm going to ask for help. Dear God, can you help us? Or community, right? So I'm describing there's a personal relationship with our higher self. Can I hold that space and say, somehow there's something here I might learn? What people, what my experience with people is the reason they come through the door is because there's a crisis and they're able to ask for help. And the first thing I really appreciate as someone walks through the door is their ability to walk through the door. Thank you for walking through this door. It takes so much courage to walk through a different door and a leap of faith to be able to ask for that help. And by the grace of God, I really hope that that's who I can be for you. I want to be. Let's look at this. Let's ask the questions and let's expand, right? So I'm going to look at a blood count. I'm going to look at liver and kidney function. I'm going to do all the things that I was so well trained by the grace of God. I'm so grateful for my training. If that person looks acute, if they look unstable, I will snap to attention because that is my training. And I was taught how to do that. And I'd say, listen, right now, you need this. I know enough of the system that my first job is to do no harm. And so you need to be safe. And right now in this setting, your blood pressure is very, very high. I need to make sure that your brain, your heart, and your kidneys are okay. And that we manage this. And this, I know how to do that, but this is not the setting and this is not the level of monitoring that you need acutely. once we have the emergency handled, please, I hope you come back, because we should ask the question of why you got that high blood pressure in the first place. And we'll expand. So we're not always just in a stimulus response, state of emergency. Let's handle the emergency so then we can expand and ask more questions. And that's where, right, that's that space. I ultimately think it might seem so, I'm listening to myself right now and I'm like, is it trite when it boils down to just opening up that space? But opening up that space is this giant leap of faith.
That was the perfect sentence. So the faith and the trust part that you were speaking about, that you have very deeply and that you do so beautifully, most don't have. So this concept is new, I'm sure, for physicians as well as for people who have set up a dynamic with the system as my rescuer, and there's nothing more than that. And the space that we're talking about, it sets up a trust, like it acknowledges something else. It acknowledges another way, another possibility, acknowledges expansion, it acknowledges contribution and responsibility. And that is something, I mean, in today's day is very rare. We are bombarded with technology and distraction. And that has taken the toll in this ability to trust ourselves, our bodies, each other, to trust taking a beat, to take that space, and our survival in so many ways, both socially, mentally, emotionally, physically, financially. The haze, if you will, of illusion is so strong. Mm-hmm. And I think that people are kicking themselves right now. I mean, not yet, not until I say what I'm about to say, because Dr. Miriam has a clinic. She opened up a clinic. She has her own space in New York, but is extremely busy. And I'm guessing because you're extremely busy, do you do telemedicine?
I have been, I guess one of the gifts of COVID is that has really opened up, and I've been able to meet people from other places. I guess because we responded to COVID in, I guess, a unique way in the context of New York City. I think there's a community of physicians doing similar things in terms of the tools. In the beginning, when there was kind of a vacuum and then not knowing to respond, it felt like such an echo of my intro into medicine through a crisis in the AIDS epidemic in Thailand and the not knowing. And so the kind of coming together in our own community, we had lots of team meetings. How are we going to respond? What are the things that have helped us with viral illnesses in the past? Should we extend those and just see what happens? It sounds like we can always, then if those tools should not yield, that we have the hospital system, of course, and I have my colleagues there. I love my colleagues. Is there a way I can offload them here and just see what happens? And then it was kind of this miracle. And I started hearing, similar information from different clinics that people responded, well, there's actually a wonderful group of physicians at the Frontline COVID Critical Care Alliance, and they were speaking to the same thing that they arrived at, that people responded really well to vitamin C, steroids if needed, a lot of nutritional strategies, zinc, of course. And that's an interesting thing when we speak about expansion, because these were the things that we're always checking. I know what people's B vitamin levels is and zinc level, and that's not the standard of care to do that nutritional testing, to do that more expansive 360-degree. Well, what's happening with your hormones and what's happening, by the way, I was always checking people's viral numbers for other viruses, such as Epstein-Barr, such as CMV, such as human herpes virus 6, all of these other things that people don't even know that they're contending with. What's incredible in the expansion and how, when you talk about perception, when people start realizing how much their body has actually been handling and trying to handle, it changes our relationship with ourselves. It allows us also this ability, like you said, to reconnect to ourselves. So many times, I think in medicine, where I felt how can I say, from educational theory, we say a lost opportunity, the loss of a teachable moment is when someone doesn't feel well, and we look at the same few labs, which are very important and very vital and not to be discounted, but those particular set of laboratories don't capture this person's experience. And instead of saying, I don't think these labs capture your experience, we say, we discount the experience and we say, you're actually fine, because the person says they're not fine and you say you're fine. That is the disconnect, because the person saying they're not fine knows better how they feel than me, because they are in their body and in their experience. And my job as a healer and as a physician is to align and say, I know you're right. I believe you because I do, because you're right. Because why would you walk through the door otherwise? It's just fun. You don't just go to the doctor. Who wants to go to the doctor? No one. So you're coming because there's a problem. I can't tell you there's not a problem. I can say the things that I checked don't reflect the problem. I'm so sorry. Let's think about, is there something else we can check? Or maybe there's someone else who knows how to check more, or maybe this just isn't the right door that you walk through. Instead of saying you don't have a problem, when you say you do have a problem, that is kind of the disconnect. You have something to say about this?
Well, isn't it just that the doctor doesn't have the tools to diagnose the problem? You're fine because what I have, my tools don't tell me anything. So it must be you, instead of, I don't have the tools to help figure out what you have. And rather than look bad or say, I don't know, I'm just going to say, I have diagnosed that you don't have a problem. And that's going back to that, again, the shaming and the power trip.
That is the heart, I think, of everything. And maybe I'll expand when we speak about kind of the spiritual overlays of a healing practice, to be able to hold our own humility. And say, I'm going to try, I'm going to get everything I got. I'm going to check everything I know how to check.
What would be your message? Let's take it two parts. And then I want to talk about your clinic and tell people how to get in touch with you. And we started this conversation today, and her first conversation was, I'm really busy. She's very popular, and we now know why. And it's because of the amazing care that she gives her patients. And again, when you look at her website, you'll see cancer's not even on there. And it's because she's treating many different people in different ways. But look, give me a few. I mean, because I saw the website, but there's so many on there. Like, why did you choose the ones that you chose?
Oh my goodness. I think it's a work in progress. I have people come to me, and it's New York, so people are so savvy and so educated, and the people that find me and that I magnetize, they've done their research. And I had one person come to me the other day, and they said, I have a history of HPV. It kept on showing up on my pap smear. So I saw the HPV, this person who specializes in HPV. And I thought to myself, oh, is that a specialty? Because I've worked with that so much, and it's not one on my list. So I think I need to learn better how to represent this work that we're doing. In a nutshell, it's root cause resolution. First of all, root cause exploration, maybe root cause exploration and intent to, if possible, by the grace of God, resolution. And that really depends on what's being brought to us. It's interesting that there are a lot of common denominators underlying lots of situations, from hormonal dysregulation, be it autoimmune thyroid, which is, incredibly, unfortunately common, adrenal, a lot of times people will come in and it's fatigue and it's brain fog. And then what we discover underlying that is neuroinflammation, but I don't put neuroinflammation, which is really what I'm contending with a lot, as a list, because that's not yet, I don't think, in people's consciousness as a diagnosis. But it is in my experience, clinical experience, what underlies insomnia, anxiety, depression, brain fog, and of course, migraines and attention deficit, learning disabilities, and of course, things that are more serious, multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's, and dementia. So how do we speak to all of that? I think that we're in the process, hopefully, as a community, as a society, to start to language these things and to start to creating more. I'm trying to learn how to language this and connect to people who are ready to do this work, to stand in that space, to explore, to be curious. And yes, of course, we're holding fear and we're holding uncertainty, but we're also holding the possibility that through this crisis, we might learn so much about ourselves that validates us, that empowers us, and that gives us a roadmap forward. So we can call that cancer, and we can call it infertility, and we can call it hypothyroidism, and we can call it IBS, and we can call it Crohn's disease, and we can call it migraines, and we can, what can't we call it?
Right.
And so I find I have a hard time saying what I can't or what I won't contribute to or won't try to do. Because I think everyone deserves to be held in that expansive, detailed, nuanced, 360-degree exploration of their beingness.
But I'd love to, I would love, you may not care, but I would love to put the spin on that just based on the conversation we've had today, those are the kinds of people that you want to work with. And you said this before we started recording, that you have a policy that if someone is calling your office on the behalf of someone else, you don't take the appointment, that there is an ownership that someone has to take. There is a readiness they have to receive what you're about to give to them and get on the journey with them. And so I think that's really telling in terms of people who are ready to receive and who are ready to take on this journey. So with that said, the link is going to be below for the website. It's rahavwellness.com, RAHAV wellness.com. You can look up Dr. Miriam, and she is in New York City on West 15th Street. So I used to live in New York. I don't know if you know that. I lived in New York for many years, but and I miss New York. So she has her physical clinic, and she has other people that work with her, and she's continuing to train more people to work in her clinic. And I'm sure as a teacher and as who you are in the world, doing a fantastic job of that. And as you've heard, she can do telemedicine also if you reach out. And I'm sure that if it's not the right fit for whatever reason, as you know, she's part of the metabolic approach to cancer cohort. And so there are a ton of doctors that share patients. It's funny how many of you I've talked to that you guys have all sent me the same patient. Like I have once we're done with this, I want to ask you about a few people, because as I talk to the doctors, I'm like, oh, you've seen that person? Oh, you've seen that person? I'm like, oh my gosh, it really is a collective of experts trying to help people with their healing process. And, I appreciate the emotional. We did not go down that path as much as I would have liked to, only because this is about spirituality and medicine, but you and I will talk offline, and that's what I do. Not the spirit, or yes, the spiritual part, but the spiritual and the emotional piece, and how much I think that really kind of is the soil and foundation of everything. If before the physical manifestation even occurs, there has to be energetic alignment with this dysfunction and disconnection before it can become a disease. Mm-hmm. First time I ever said that. So
amazing. So well said. I love it. So
I just channeled that. That just, we're talking about spirituality, just channeled because I didn't download right there. I downloaded that right there. So appropriate for right now. So any other last things that you would like to, anyone who wants to work with you, who is interested, because there's going to be a lot of people who are interested in getting to know more, even if they aren't ready to take action, because let's say a lot of my population, they're healthy and they're like, and I don't know that I'm dealing with anything, but is there anything that you would tell them or encourage them to do?
Oh, that's such a beautiful question. And I'm going to have to take a brief moment to reflect on that. I think that, I think one of the things that we are all dealing with it, and we can make it conscious, is the effect of the environment on our overall health. And I think that's one of the things that we're unmasking. I wonder if, and this is not dependent on me in any way, there are definitely direct to consumer services where you can figure out, are you dealing with glyphosate? Are you dealing with heavy metals? And it turns out that all of us are dealing with things like that to degrees. And I think that if we can be more proactive and kind of unmask the truth about the impact of the environment on our health, it can make us be really proactive consumers. One of the things that's kind of a foundation to almost any protocol that I put someone on is to have some kind of a binder in something that serves as a functional mop for environmental toxins, be it a medicinal clay, be it chlorella, which is a blue-green algae, that's a nutrient-dense food, that's a blood purifier. I think that we're learning more and more about glyphosate and how pervasive it is and how it is so responsible as a carcinogen for increasing our cancer risk. And we see those numbers unfortunately going up. So I think just my message to our community and the global community is that we can all become proactive consumers of understanding who we are, even if we don't have any massive, dysfunction or any significant dysfunction, that we can always swim upstream from that. And because our body loves us and works so hard to keep us safe, and that, the more that we can consistently offload the body and use tools like that help us offload, and the more that we expand our consciousness around the truth of our interaction within our environment, the more we can be savvy consumers of health as opposed to needing to respond to a dis-ease. So I don't know if that was exactly what you're asking, but I think I would say that there's so much I want for us, for us, that for our planet, for our human species, for life. I wish so much for everyone to experience life with joy and vibrancy and dynamism and radiance, and that the more that we understand what it takes to live our life within that joyful, dynamic space from a health perspective, the more we can kind of manifest that. And again, it starts with this consciousness. So when you start looking at those things, you can expand your consciousness around how to optimize you. I wish that for everyone universally.
Beautiful. RahavWellness.com. Check her out. Send her a message. Let her know you love the show. Tell her she needs her own show. And to educate the world more, we need her teacher voice with all her love and compassion more in the world. Thank you, Dr. Miriam, for being on the show.
Thank you so much, JJ. You're the very, very best. I thank you so much for this platform to share how brilliant you are.